Astrology for Awakening and the transits. So remember that Astrology for Awakening is a meditation on the invitation of life as expressed through astrology to awaken, to realize, to embody, to express radiance in every moment. And so the Astrology for Awakening approach to transits is not what is going to happen to me. It's about how is this transit opening me up? How is it opening me up to more fully attune to the wisdom energy of the archetypes and to embody the archetypal wisdom in my life and as my life, because each transit is a very specific invitation based on the archetypal nature, the archetypal gift and blessing of the transiting planet. So we're going to, in this talk, we'll explore the particular gifts that we need to open up to, and when we focus on each planetary transit. But for now, I want to underline that the nature of this approach is about the awakening possibilities. So each one of the transiting planets are going around and touching our natal planets in various angles or relationships, aspects. Each one of your natal planets symbolizes both the specific healing path that your soul is taking in this life, and it's also a symbol of the way you can bring grace, wisdom, energy, and blessings of that healing into the world for the benefit of all beings. So this is a paradox that the natal planet describes a particular quality of incompleteness or woundedness, and it also describes a very specific pathway or practice, spiritual sadhana, that we are here, and you are here, and I am here based on our chart, to realize, to embody, and express. So the chart as a whole, the whole thing as a mandala, is both an image of our karmic predicament, to quote Ram Dass, of our karmic inheritance, of the unanswered questions, the unhealed traumas, the unbalanced debts. And it's also, this mandala of the chart as a whole, an image of your dharma, that unique purpose and calling, the unique way that you are here to participate in the joyful unfoldment of life and the awakening of all beings to that joyful presence. So each transit is going to offer us, it appears dual, but it's really, it is offering us a non-dual invitation to both heal our memory tracks and to become an even greater blessing to all, to life. So the general question of a transit is, what is the call? What is the call of this transit? The more focused question will be based on the nature of the transiting planet, the sign it's in, the houses that are being activated, the nature, sign, and house of the natal planet, or planets that are being energized or opened up through the transit. So the Astrology for Awakening approach is very deep, very universal, very archetypal, and also very specific. Based on your karmic predicament, there's going to be a unique configuration of people, events, and things that form the context within which you are going to be able to align with the evolutionary impulse, the awakening quality of that particular transit. So it's formulating questions, formulating transit questions. And the idea in this is to provoke deep reflection, to expose habits of defensiveness or patterns of self-contraction, ways of being rigid in our life, in our perspectives, these rigidities, these contractions that impede healing and limit flourishing. So, quick example of a woman, recently a student whose natal sun is in Gemini in the 4th house, and transiting Mars is coming over this point. And as it did, working with this approach and reflecting on her own experience, obviously, she became acutely aware. Mars is very acute, boom, 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 acutely aware of the need to be more direct in her communication with key family members. And she became in touch with a tendency of holding back from simply, directly stating her needs, her wants. And instead, she saw a way that she was subtly trying to nudge others indirectly in her desired direction. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, but whether it was successful or not, she was outgrowing this and feeling dissatisfied, incongruent, out of alignment with this indirect way of communicating, and feeling called to be more forthright. So she reflected on a classical Mars question of awakening, and in relationship to Mars in Gemini transiting the sun in the 4th house, what would it look like for you to be more courageous in your family conversations? Now, she took that question almost like a koan, like a Zen koan, like a spiritual inquiry, not to just think about it cognitively, but to feel into it, to open into it, to let it drop in to her body. And when she did that, and when she invited herself to step into that courageous conversation, even simply imaginatively, there was a feeling of risk. It felt even a bit dangerous, like she was heading into a confrontation with no certain outcome. And that's actually accurate. She would be making herself vulnerable by being more open and more direct. And so those emotions of risk, of danger particularly, these are the very emotions that arise when Mars is active. And the fight or flight or freeze impulses are a way of kind of dissipating and scattering the potential gift that the Mars is offering us to connect with. What would it look like instead of scattering the energies or suppressing them or dissipating them? What would it look like to connect to that strength and clarity? Not to control or manipulate others, but simply to be clear, so others can choose freely. And this is where her inquiry took her. Rather than reacting to the emotions that were rising up, she was able to sense them, feel them, witness them. And as she witnessed them, the mud, as it were, settled. The emotional reactivity settled. And she became open, more clearly open to a pathway that was appropriate and courageous, and offered ways for her to experimentally make forays into this practice of courageous conversation. Forays and experiments in awakening. And that is the invitation of every transit. I know the popular way is to say transformation, but that can sound like such a big word and such a daunting kind of project. they do, of course, invite us to transform, but they invite us to take modest and meaningful experimental forays into our awakening life, to titrate our ingestion of this archetypal energy so that it can be integrated in a new way of being, a more awakened life. This is what each transit is asking. And in the process, every planetary transit, just as Mars did for her in that case, will bring forth unredeemed emotional states with mental models, belief systems that keep us confined and limit our ways of expressing our gift, expressing the grace that can flow through our charts more wisely, more joyfully, more lovingly. So let's take a look briefly at each of the planetary energies and the transiting invitation and some of the spiritual inquiry questions that they might be offering. I'm not going to look at every sign and every possible combination because they're almost infinite. We're just going to take the transiting planets themselves. So the sun goes around, the zodiac in a year, as you know, and so the sun is this dynamic force, and it's the radiant symbol of the inner self. It's the royal symbol for the degree that we each generate light and express warmth and embody sovereignty in our life. The sun is how we can shine and radiate our individualized creative expression of the divine radiance. So when the sun is touching a planet, it's in that specific context of the symbolism of that natal planet. This is where I'm being called. It's where you're being called to be a source of light and warmth. How can I be a source of light and warmth in this particular context? What would it look like to relax here into my innate sovereignty? What would it look like in this particular energetic context, in this particular relationship, to let the light of the spirit shine through me into these people, events, and things? And then there's the moon, which moves rapidly, 28 days roughly, around the zodiac. The moon is the emotional force of habit and of needs. And so it's a symbol for our instinctive needs for comfort, for survival, for happiness, of the simple needs of life, the embodied needs of life, and how it represents how we respond and nurture and how we feel our way into the world and feel the world through our moment-to-moment emotional style. So as the moon goes around, it's like a little couple, it only spends about 2.5 days in any aspect. It's moving quite quickly. And so it's like mini workshop in emotional intelligence in a particular area. So it's in this particular area, where am I being called to care for my own needs with emotional intelligence? How and where am I being called to care for others' needs with greater emotional intelligence? And in this particular transit, what would it look like to embody emotional balance? Mercury moves around in a little bit longer than the moon. It's the mental force of ideation, the mind, and analysis. It's the symbol that represents our style of problem solving, of making cognitive sense of the world and how we tell the story, the mental models that we use to describe reality, how we analyze and interpret our experience. And Mercury is asking us the question, how can I listen more curiously to what life is communicating, what the message of life is coming to me through the people and events and things? How can I become more of a learner and less of a knower? How can I become a student or disciple of life and receive what life is trying to share with me, and how can I let go of old stories and calm the monkey mind to receive that new insight. Okay, Venus. Venus is the love symbol, the magnetic force of love and attraction. It symbolizes the way that we find beauty, what we find beautiful and attractive, the ways that we generate harmony, and how we magnetize love and what we truly value. So as Venus touches the different natal planets, we are being asked, how am I being called to embody, in this context, embody love and express more I-thou relationship. See the sacred humanity in the other and have a heartfelt connection with that. Where am I being called now to recognize and enjoy beauty and pleasure, to let the joyful gifts and the soothing presence of life into my heart? And what would it look like in this particular context that the transit is activating to be more loving? Mars, we briefly touched in the story, is the motivating force of will, of action. It's the symbol of energy, of gut-centered action, and it's the will to survive and to take dedicated action towards to serve a purpose. So where am I being called to face fear and to embody more courage? That'll be revealed by the planets that Mars is touching, like with the woman in the 4th house in the family context. In Gemini, with communication. Where am I being called in my life to defend a boundary? And looking at the chart can begin to give us deep insights into that. What would it look like in this context to be more bold? Jupiter, the 12-year cycle of Jupiter, the uplifting force of expanding our consciousness in the ancient days in the yoga tradition. One Jupiter cycle was considered basically one round of our spiritual sadhana. 12 years, do a practice, then revisit. Not take a weekend workshop, that's a moon aspect. Take a Jupiter cycle to really begin to explore, to study, to integrate a new vision. It's the symbol of the quest to discover and embody truth. It's the energy that boosts the confidence, the inner confidence that it takes to expand our horizon of awareness. And as Jupiter touches different natal planets, how and where am I being called to dream a bigger dream, to step into an expansive adventure, a spiritual journey? Jupiter asks us, what would it look like in this context to have more faith in life's goodness, life's benevolence? If I believe that, how would I show up? Saturn, in contrast, is the limiting force, of discipline and of responsibility. It's the symbol of that need for deep integrity and for abiding in our foundational values. Saturn is the path of incarnating integrity and values patiently, deliberately, working within the limits of time and space and of our karma on the earth plane to gradually become that incarnation of the good. So Saturn asks us, where am I being called to be more consistently disciplined? Where am I being invited to find strength in my inner authority more than in following others' opinions or what I think are others' opinions? And what would it look like in this context to embody greater integrity? Uranus is the liberating force of awakening autonomy. It's the symbol of our innate freedom and the aha illuminations that come when we nudge up against and open up to that innate freedom. It's the call to break free from conditioned identities and to radically express our unique giftedness. So when Uranus touches a context in our chart, how and where am I being called to step out of culturally defined mindsets and roles? How and where am I being called to dance to the beat of my own genius and my own drum? And what would it look like to be more free, more inherently free, even a little kooky according to others? Neptune, the dissolving force of transpersonal compassion. It's the symbol of sublime inspiration that dissolves away the isolated self into merging into the ocean of being. Neptune is the way we attune to the immeasurable and dissolve polarities, either orness in any context, into an underlying sense of undefinable but clear unity of existence. So as Neptune touches planetary forces in our chart, where and how am I being called to be still, to enter the mystery and to open to the mystery? Where and how am I being called to a trans-rational, not irrational, beyond rational vision of existence? And what would it look like to be more surrendered to the higher guidance? Finally, Pluto, the regenerative force of death and rebirth. It's the symbol of taking, and the call to take a shamanic-like journey and to fall apart in order to be deeply initiated into the sacred mysteries of life and death. As it touches planetary forces in our chart, how and where am I being called to face the shadow side of myself? Not only face, but embrace the shadow side of the self. Where am I being, and how am I being called to withdraw projections, to withdraw the way I've projected strengths and weaknesses onto the world, and to care for those soul wounds deep within? What would it look like for me to cooperate more fully in the death and rebirth process that is at play in a particular context in my life? So this is it, opening up. We are opening up, and every planetary transit is an opening invitation to examine, to feel into, to bring into consciousness the unredeemed memory tracks. And as we do that, we will almost inevitably experience uncomfortable emotions, maybe stressful thoughts, body sensations that are a bit challenging. And these are the transits at work. These are the transits at work. They're asking us to lean into that discomfort, to welcome the emotional arisings, to witness the stressful thoughts, to breathe and to let the sensations move through us in order to connect us to the archetypal healing gift that every transit is offering. The transits are taking us to our learning, growing, awakening edge in order to facilitate the healing that we took birth for.